Hey guys, Dave Huber here for TRADEway, and it is time for Mind Mastery. Mind Mastery, guys, the time in which we try to master the mind. A lot of times, what you've heard from us when it comes to stock trading is 80% mental, and it's only about 20% skill set. So that is what Mind Mastery is all about, getting the mentality right so that you can begin to get the skill set right. Because if this is messed up, then the skill set just won't work for you. And so Blair, momentum, man, I mean, it's a big thing. And I think a lot of times we equate momentum with victory. And understandably so, because it feels like victory when you have momentum, but it's not the same, right? Like momentum isn't the moment of victory. It's the moments of progress leading to the victory. And it can also work against you. So it can also be the momentum, that momentum is the moments of progress that are leading to failure, right? If it's moments of progress for the opposite side, right? For the enemy, for whoever's against you, maybe whatever task is hitting you in the face and you're trying to overcome a situation in your life. Maybe it's a temptation, whatever it is. You're not experiencing momentum in your favor, you're experiencing it against you. That's what today is all about. How do we flip the script, get the momentum in our favor, and how should we think about it? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to start out, I mean, there's lots of stuff, and I know we're going to go through some specific headings here, but, you know, I grew up in a family that watched hockey. And here in Dallas, I'll go and I'll watch the Stars. And there's a saying in hockey for those of us, probably few of us who are on here, maybe not many, I don't know. There's a saying in hockey, you mentioned sports, Dave, and it's called tilting the ice, or the ice is tilted, right? When you watch that game long enough, this is true of all sports, I think, but it's certainly true in hockey. You can watch the momentum of the game shift. One thing might happen, a big hit on the boards. Maybe it's a goal, maybe it's a penalty, whatever, but something happened. It charged the crowd, or it charged the team, or the captain got a little more pep in his step, or whatever. And it's like the ice is tilted, because it feels like it's easy for them to get to the other side, and it's hard for the other team to get back. It tilts, but at some point you can see it and it tilts the other way, and it's not subtle. It's very visible, particularly in that game where you go, whoa, okay, momentum has definitely shifted. The momentum doesn't mean the game is over.
Right.
But it does mean that you have more power in that present moment, or you're more aware of the power you have in that present moment. Certain things are synergizing to create strength and power, because one of the things we talked about, Dave, is, well, what is momentum? So we need to talk about that. But there's something happening in that moment of the game. The game's not over. The period's not over. The play's not over, whatever. Like, whatever it is, this could be in any other situation. And except in the moment, that momentum does play a significant role in that eventual outcome, the push and pull and shifting of momentum. So I think the first thing I would say, as we lay a groundwork and a layout, if you will, of momentum and how to make this concept practical. I think for me, momentum is hope. Momentum is hope. It's not the victory. You just mentioned it's not the victory. It's not the victory in say the game, right? The game is still happening for 3 periods or 2 halves or 4 quarters or whatever, right? But it is definitely a victory in the sense that this is the first stepping stone towards that ultimate goal, whatever that might be. And it has to precede that in most cases. So when you understand momentum is for you, or how to get it that way, then I think that brings a lot of hope. And I'll say this quick, because some of us are trying to win without momentum, without the
That's so
conditions
hard.
that provide momentum. And when you do that, things are harder. They're just harder. Maybe not impossible. Maybe not impossible. You know, the right things in the wrong environments are next to near impossible. Jesus scattered 4 kinds of seed. Was it 4 kinds of seed he scattered? No, it was 1 kind of seed. He scattered one kind of seed on 4 different soils.
4 different soils, yes.
Right. 1 kind of seed, 4 different soils. There was nothing wrong with the seed. The seed was all good. It had completely different outcomes. I understand that the greater message of that particular parable is the condition of the heart. And we could talk about that because momentum touches that as well. But to keep it more broad, what I'm saying is that the right seed in the wrong environment does not yield. Okay. And the right environment should create momentum. The last thing I would say to start us out here, Dave, for me, is that when you recognize that you don't have momentum, I still think that's hope, because it's an accurate diagnosis of where you're at. Now, somebody out there today is like, well, congratulations.
That's great.
I've signed on to this thing, and you're here telling me like,
I'm hopeless.
you're hopeless. There's your diagnosis. Like, no. Now we can treat the thing that you maybe haven't thought of treating, right? Maybe there's an area of my life. Dave knows me well enough to know I'll sometimes give this little illustration of, if you're going to grow a garden, are you going to try to grow the garden in the conditions that a person would grow a garden? I'm not a gardener. You know, Dave's wife, Katie, her one of her younger brothers anyway, Ben, he's a little green thumb, man. He just loves gardening, and he knows so much about it, and he loves it, and it's like a thing. That's not me, but I think just about everybody on here, there's some basic things to growing a plant or a whatever, your seed you're planting. You would do that. You would create certain conditions for that. And if you didn't create those conditions, if you didn't do even the basic things like water and sun and dirt and a certain kind of dirt and not rocks, etc., right? I mean, we could be really dramatic with it. You would not think that was that weird if it didn't grow.
Yep.
Oh man, didn't get much of a crop this year. You know, I planted it in a parking lot, you know. That sounds ridiculous, I realize, but I think both Dave and I have seen, and we've noticed this in our own lives. I certainly have. At some point, I realized one of the things I've been trying to do is reap a harvest, planting seeds in the wrong place, in the wrong environment. And to me, one of the facets of that is momentum. Now, we could talk about the different aspects of the right environment. That's not our goal today. Our goal today is momentum. But I would say knowing that I'm in momentum is hope. Knowing that I'm not, one of those conditions that is
so good,
exponential for me to grow whatever it is I'm trying to grow, or reap whatever I'm trying to reap. Like, I'm sowing, but I'm not reaping. It's like, okay, or I'm not sowing. I mean, that's a different problem. You know what I mean? But then, okay, then knowing that momentum is a part of this. And for some of us on here today, you're going, this is putting the concept, the reality, the power, the exponential help of momentum on the map for me, on the radar for me, in a way that it hasn't. That's why I say that I think it's hopeful, right? It's hopeful to know where we're at and know where we're not at, so we can adjust. You know, of course, the question, Dave, is what is momentum really?
Momentum? And then, where do we get it?
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing everybody's going to want to know. And then that makes sense. Well, how do I create it?
Well, so I have an analogy that's right along with your hockey analogy. It's something that actually happened in my life. I played a lot of basketball, right? And I use a lot of basketball analogies. Anyone who went to the TRADEway live event, they heard like 2 or 3 of them. But this one, I actually was playing in a game. We were down by a ton. We'd tried so many different things, Blair. Leading up to this game, we were undefeated. And it felt like we just hit a brick wall and nothing we tried worked. Like, we tried everything, all the tricks we had in our bag. I mean, we were passing to all our best players. We were getting to the open man. The open man didn't stay open very long. And every time we thought we had something working, something slapped us in the face and we were right back down. And going into the fourth quarter of this game, we were down by 20 points. 20 points. And we were just seeing the hope of a perfect season just obliterated, right? Like, because we were completely like undefeated up until this point. We had won like 15 games in a row, and all of a sudden, just brick wall. And we figured something out. So let me pause there, because when you look up the algebraic equation for momentum, it's P equals M times V, all right? Which is basically momentum equals mass times velocity.
Okay.
And if you look at that, what's interesting about it is that we often think of velocity like speed. They're totally different things. Well, they're not totally different, but there's a very key difference between them. Speed is just what it sounds like, going fast. But velocity is speed with direction. And that is so big, because if you want speed, more power to you. But if you want momentum, you can't get it without velocity. It's not mass times velocity. It's mass times, I mean, it's not mass times speed, it's mass times velocity, right? So think about this. What would that look like in your stock trading? Maybe you're trying to learn something new, right? And this is brand new to you and you just want some momentum. So you go, I'm going to watch as many videos as possible. And you just speed through your videos, right? Just consume. And then you feel overwhelmed. You feel like you don't know where to start. You feel like you've got information overload. That's because you've been using speed and not velocity, right? Like, what you want to do is you want to watch videos and then go, okay, now how can I apply what I've learned in this video? Try to apply, try to adjust, right? Like, analyze, adjust, reapply, keep going, and actually give yourself some direction. If you don't have someone coaching you, you're going to have speed and not velocity. In that basketball game, Blair, we go into that fourth quarter, we're down by 20 points. Our coach, not too happy with us. He says, you guys have tried everything you know to do except what I've told you to do. And we said, what's that? He said, I have been trying to tell you this whole game that you have a golden opportunity to score. You just have to attack the sides and not right direct on. We said, what do you mean? He said, hit the baseline. You've got open shots. So what happened in that moment was we had tried everything and we reached the point of desperation. We finally listened to coach. Right. And maybe that's how you are in whatever area you need momentum in. Maybe it's in your stock trading. You've tried and it's just not clicking and you're getting desperate. Maybe it's in a relationship. You've tried and everything you've tried just seems to pile on the drama. And now you're getting desperate. It looks like the relationship's falling apart. Right. Maybe it's in your work life. Maybe it's in your home life. Maybe it's just in your financial walk. Right. You're trying. You can't make ends meet. And now you're getting desperate. That's where we were in this basketball game. We had gotten to the point of desperation and we finally turned to a coach. And the coach showed us with direction where to attack. So we didn't have to work as hard. It wasn't just speed anymore. It was velocity. And what happened was in that one quarter, we started attacking the sides and we scored just one bucket. We scored one bucket and it was easier than we expected. It was a real fast bucket. Well, that was cool. We go down to the other side. We play some defense. We do what coach told us to do on defense and we got to stop. All right. So what happened was attack the sides, score. So attack the sides, score, and then stop. Once we did that once, it was like we caught a vision. And that's the thing, is that momentum, it's hope, but it's hope because of vision, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, we were like, whoa, that worked. Let's rinse and repeat. We have the ball back because we got to stop. Let's attack the sides. Let's score. And then let's stop them again. We did that 2 or 3 times, scored a quick 6 points. All of a sudden, momentum shifted. You don't tilt ice in basketball, but the entire court got tilted in our favor, Blair.
Right.
And by the time we were done with that quarter, we were up by 6 points, 20 points down to 6 points up, because we got to a point of desperation. We turned to a coach. We stopped leaning unto our own understanding, right? Like, that's the scripture talks about that time and time again. It's like, lean not unto your own understanding, right?
Right.
In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall what? Direct your paths, direction, velocity. So God's going to give us velocity, which will promote momentum, but we've got to turn to the Lord first and to a coach second, right? And then the idea behind having that direction is, if you can catch a vision for the way to win, because it's not the moment of victory, but it is all the moments leading up, all the moments of progress. Once you go, oh, now I see how to win, that's where that hope really gets lifted up. And then all of a sudden you've got momentum. And once you have it, it's hard to lose it, because once you've seen it, it's this called law of exposure. Once you've been exposed to something, you can't be unexposed to it. So once you have momentum, it's very hard to lose it. Doesn't mean it's impossible, because you can also get exposed to roadblocks, right? Things that can slow you back down. And so I think it's really important to catch a vision, but it's hard to catch a vision when you feel stuck. So you really need some direction.
So that goes back to what I was saying about why this feels like hope to me, because, you know, when you're down by 20 in the fourth quarter and nothing that you have been trying to do, whatever the level of your experience and talent, and the team captain rallies everybody and and it doesn't work, you know, and then you get one strategy, one piece of input, and you make that bucket, as you said, Dave. Now, you haven't won the game yet, but you start to feel a shift. And this is where we want to help people understand. Dave mentioned multiple times, our problem in those instances is not a lack of, for lack of a better term, gusto. It's not a lack of commitment. It's not even a lack of desire. Now, those things could be issues. They could be issues, but let's assume they're not in this instance. And in Dave's story, that wasn't the issue. Could have been, wasn't. Okay. So you've got desire, you've got team, which is important, right? We could pull all these principles out, but then you go, well, wait a second. I shifted one thing based on a coach, outside perspective, expertise. We hit that on here all the time, guys. I mean, that's exponential. It's why we do this session right here, right? It's why we do this session right here, because somebody on here is going to take 1, 2, 5 things out of this, and they're going to run with it. And that's going to be your adjustment to the baseline. That's going to start to create a shift of what? Of momentum. But this is why I say the hope piece, because you can't win the game in a second. You can't win the game in the next 5 seconds in many cases. Maybe Dave tells us this amazing story of a buzzer beater jump shot.
25-point bucket.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, maybe a last second buzzer beater or something, right? But the story wasn't, and so much of life isn't that. It's no. I've got some game left to play here. But what I can do is get some input. That's one thing. That is a chain reaction. See, Dave, I've said this to many people. I have people in my life. Now, I've done this too. So full disclosure, but I've tried to be much better about this because I watch people do the same thing over and over and over. I've watched family members have the same struggles, conversations over and over and over. And my thing, because I was taught to value leadership, input, coaching, things like that. And I never thought at the time, wow, that's a really powerful ingredient for momentum. I wasn't thinking that, but I was taught that. And I've suggested to people, hey, maybe go see the pastor about that, or, invite some, whatever. Depends on the nature of the roadblock or the issue or the cyclical thing. We all have stuff, man. You know what I mean? So we all have goals. We all have a higher level. I haven't just hired coaches because I've got problems. I've hired coaches because I feel like I've been good, but I can be great. Right? Dave knows I've talked about I'll just keep it short. I've had several coaches in my life because of this day and age, being able to go on Zoom and do the kinds of things we do. Dude, we have access to incredible coaching that we didn't have access to before. I've talked about that with our TRADEway students, because it's since 2015 when I started, guys, it's 100 times greater now even than it was then. And a big part of that is that you have access to coaches in a way that you didn't. But the point is that I will say, hey, why don't you pull somebody in on this? Get yourself a fresh strategy, because you maybe aren't going to win the game overnight, but you're going to get something you can do that's going to create the beginning of a shift. Your confidence is shot. You're tired. You're frustrated. You're emotional. You're in the game, except this is the game of life. So the stakes can feel high, even sometimes when they're not as high as they feel. The enemy likes to make it feel like it's do or die all the time. Now, there is obviously important things, but the point is that we can be really worn down and weighed down. And I watch people refuse to really allow that influence come in. They refuse to ask for help, refuse to allow influence. And there's different reasons for that. That's beyond the discussion today. But the point is that I think that's a very powerful ingredient for what momentum can be, so that you and I can just adjust one thing. And we're talking about getting momentum. If I don't have it in an area, how do I get it? How do I get it? Now, here's how you don't get it. Dave's story goes, guys, I'm watching the play. I'm watching the action. This is the vulnerability. This is what their team does. Here's what I need you to do. And Dave goes out there and tries to fire a three from the top of the key on every play. You know what I mean? That's how you lose a game.
Yep.
It didn't have to be that way. You know what I mean? And I can be that stubborn. So I'll just tell on myself, but sometimes we don't have momentum because the opportunities we have to make one basket aren't happening the way we want them to happen, and we don't want to adjust. And just get a little more, maybe a little deeper in this, Dave. I don't know how far down this rabbit hole we want to go. I think let me just say it very quickly this way. If you feel like the coach, as it were, be it a person, or maybe the Lord, or maybe it's your spouse, there's a tricky one, but also a powerful one, if you find yourself just not doing it, well, start there, because you may be sabotaging your own momentum in an area. And I would bet that in a lot of cases, Dave, that first shift in momentum, the enemy is being strategic, and he's put it on the other side of fear. Or he's put it on the other side. He could be whispering in Dave's ear like, hey, you're the star of this basketball game, Dave. I mean, you can carry this thing home. You got to do this all by yourself. You can't trust these guys. You can't trust these guys on this team. Do you see how he missed that last one? No. This is all up to you, right? I'm making this up, but these are the kinds of things that happen,
Well, and you're really hitting on the heart of the matter. Like, if you want to get to the kernel of where does momentum really start, you just nailed it right there, Blair, because what we do is we get so focused on the end goal. And you see people do this on the basketball court all the time, or in other sports, right? Like, you get so caught up on the end goal. I want to win. I want to be victorious in this game, that you forget all the steps to get to the end goal. So now the only thing that matters and the only thing I'm focused on is the end goal. So I have to shoot threes because I need 20 points, right? So it just makes sense. Shoot threes. I'm doing what won't get me there because I'm only focused and too focused on the end goal. We tend to go, all right, without a vision, the people should perish, right? So like, I look at my end goal. I want to make money in the stock market. I want to go and buy a new house, or I want to buy a new car, or I want to get out of debt, or I want to, you name it, right? Work on my ministry. And we look at that end goal and we say, that's it. Now I have to make a ton, because in order to buy a house, I need a ton, or in order to buy a car, I need a ton. And we don't get focused on the process leading up to it. This happened to the Israelites. The Israelites are supposed to go to the promised land. They have a vision for getting to the promised land, just one step in front of the other. Walk. Once they get there, they lack the vision to take the promised land, right? So once they got there to try and take the promised land, what did they say? They look, they see the giants in the land, and they see themselves as grasshoppers. So we're touching on a couple of different, like a whole bunch of different things, right? One, like the way you see yourself is the way you think the other people are going to see you, and the way that you think other people see you. If you let that affect you, you're not going to go and take land, metaphorically speaking. But two, like you said, I've got to trust the coach, right? Moses is like, let's go take the land. They don't trust him. Joshua and Caleb, we can take the land. They don't trust them. They go, by my own abilities, I'm a grasshopper, so I can't do it. They get this massive I'm just me syndrome. And now they are desperate, and they remain desperate because now they're not working as a team. So it starts from a place of giving up control, which is tough for us, right? Especially if I'm responsible for the end results. I'm responsible for, like, where do I go? There's an element of faith that has to happen with my team. We had to stop leaning on our own understanding and doing what we felt like would work, and trust the coach. And so you step out in faith, which Joshua and Caleb, of course, had. And when we do that, all of a sudden the path becomes clear. All of a sudden we have something that we were completely missing before. And if we just focus on what our coaches can show us, or what the Lord can show us, and put an element of trust and faith in it, then a man can devise his steps, right? But the Lord will direct his path, right? So there's something that we've got to start from a place of giving up control. And that allows us to humble ourselves so that the Lord can lift us up. And when we do that, that will allow us to start valuing, like you said, outside counsel. For plans fail for lack of counsel, but there is a safety and multitude of advisors. So
yeah, I mean, there's lots of wisdom as to how do we begin to inject different things that can help bring momentum, sometimes, because I think one of the things we're touching on here, Dave, imagine I was pushing against a door, and really you can push as hard as you want, but once you turn the handle, it'll open. You know what I mean? Like there's things where it's not for lack of energy. It's not for lack of, I could maybe even give a lot of momentum. I could run pretty hard, you know what I mean? But there's different things that bring wisdom and power and breakthrough. And that's one of the things that I was thinking for today was, momentum is a form of power, but for the believer, there really is no momentum quite like what we give ourselves. Let me say this differently. The power that we get from walking in step with what the Holy Spirit is doing is a really, really huge gift, because not only is God so gracious that he gives us desires that he then intends to fulfill. He works and wills in us to do his good pleasure. but then he gives us power to fulfill it, right? He gives us power to fulfill it. And so for me, one of the things that has always been so much a part of the momentum in my life is, I'll use this saying I heard some years ago: grace is greater than hustle. Doesn't mean we don't hustle, right? Doesn't mean that at all, but it means you remember it's not stated in a biblical text, obviously, but it is a biblical truth that it is greater than what we can do with our own hands. And so submitting to what the Lord is saying and doing, seeking him, planning your course, but submitting it to him, getting insight, all of these things are factors that, for the believer in particular, we have advantages that create tremendous momentum. Favor is all through the scriptures, and favor creates tremendous momentum. But I think we have to understand this concept of momentum and how important it is, how we empower it, and then even how we disempower it. And one of the things I was thinking, Dave, is that as I think about momentum and places in my life that have momentum, there's been partnership with God, there's been energy expended, there's been persistence and time, and some things came easier, right? There's certain areas of life that just do, and there's certain areas of life that just don't. But as I've sown in those areas, perhaps I have created some momentum. And now that we're more aware even of what that is, we are positioned to do two things. One, protect it. The enemy, this is one of the things that I feel like the Lord's been speaking to me about this week, Dave. I've been reading in the scriptures, particularly in two spots. In Luke's gospel, Jesus sets his face to Jerusalem, right? And one of remember, we have word for word and we have thought for thought translations. So there's the modern language in terms of just what's the text driving at, and then you have a more word for word translation, which is really for more of our study, and we move from there. So that said, it was saying in Luke's gospel that because of the Lord's passion, as he set his face towards Jerusalem, he allowed nothing to distract him. He allowed nothing to distract. Dude, when I read that the last couple of days, it just jumped out the page, and I was like, whoa, because I really feel like one of the things that the enemy has been trying to do in my life is just constant distractions. This thing comes up, that thing comes up. I should do this, I should do that, social media, whatever. It could be all kinds of things. But what's my point? My point is that he's trying to slow momentum. Discouragement. You mentioned the Israelites, right? That's discouragement, disillusionment, unbelief, shift of focus, right? Their focus wasn't on the Lord, their focus was on themselves. And when we're doing business with God, he's going to invite us into things that cannot be done apart from him. So when we stop having a vision, when we're not connected to him, the only outcome is going to be overwhelm and intimidation, because now you're looking at walking on water without the Lord in sight, and that's not going to work. You know what I'm saying? So that distraction is a big piece of it. Now, that's just one piece. What I'm trying to highlight here, Dave, is there are factors that come against our momentum. And I want us to know, hey, what are the areas of my life I feel like I have momentum? How did that happen? Okay. How am I protecting that? Number one, how am I preserving that? How am I promoting that? Whoa, that's an area of momentum. That could be, that's an area of my life that's going to have a measure of ease. Okay. But how am I also transferring what I did there or what I saw the Lord do into some other areas of my life? Because I promise you, once you start seeing how that gets built in one area, you can start transferring that to some other areas. So look at some of the areas of your life that you're like, okay, maybe this isn't working and this isn't working and but this part's working. and it's moving. Why? How? What's happening there? Right? You could probably get some very powerful insight from that and start to go, well, okay, I can do this in other areas as well. I was watching a documentary last night, Dave. It had Mark Wahlberg was in it. I've never seen this in my life. I'll probably never watch another episode. It was 30 minutes, and it was just him in all his business ventures. He's got so many things going on. And I heard this quote, and it's the only reason I bring it up, because he has been successful in so many different areas. Sometimes I'll get him popping up on an ad or something for like a prayer app. He's like very avid on,
Yeah.
Yes. It said success is transferable. Success is transferable. When you understand it in one area, you can transfer it to another area. But, and this was just the wisdom in this particular quote, but you're going to have to do the things, be willing to do the work that you did in the other area. Okay.
Yep.
And you're going to have to be willing to learn the things you don't know. You're going to have to be humble and persevering enough to learn the things you don't know. Because some areas come easier, Dave, and some don't. Some get momentum easier, some don't. People on this webinar today, I imagine you're probably not on here thinking about momentum in the area that you just have a ton of victory and a ton of momentum and a ton of breakthrough. It's probably some of the other areas that you want to see more of that. But what I'm saying is there's a bridge, there's a testimony between the two where what you have in the one can transfer to the other, right? So I think that's a really important thing in terms of, yes, preserving it in one area, protecting it in one area, but understanding how that transfers and promotes it into another area,
Well, and so
I'll just say, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was only going to say, for me, wrapping up that a little bit more, just to say, whatever you think will promote momentum in your life, when you think about what subtracts from momentum, just think of the opposite of the things that promote it. What's creating it? What's protecting it? Okay, whatever the opposite is, watch out for that, because that's going to steal it, right? And I think that's important.
It's definitely important. And I think what you're getting at is like, okay, so what is something practical we can do to make sure that we get momentum and we keep momentum?
I agree.
And I learned something really cool. It was very practical because it was something Myron Golden was teaching at one of his events. I was at his event a couple of weeks ago. And guys, I want this to be something that's extremely practical for you. This is one of the most practical things I've ever seen in my life. Words are important. Words bring frames, right? They bring focus. Hebrews chapter 11 says, we know by faith we know that by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things that are seen are made of things that do not appear. And so words are important, and the way we use our words brings focus. And so here's how you gain momentum. Here's how you activate momentum, because momentum only comes from having force, right? Like an object at rest stays at rest unless it is acted upon by an outside force. So that means if you don't have momentum, you won't have momentum unless you force it. Like something has to be forced in order for you to begin to gain momentum, because you got to have that mass plus times velocity. You got to get it moving, right? So how do we do that? Well, first you take a look at the facts, right? You see the facts, and let's just say you see a fact about your trading. It's not going great, right? Maybe your trading's not going great. You have an opportunity to look at the fact from the positive or from the negative. And if you look at the opportunity from the negative, then that is going to manifest as a belief in your brain. And that belief is going to be doubt, right? Like, it didn't work. I doubt I could make this work, right? I tried it. It didn't work. I'm experiencing doubt because I thought if I tried it and it worked, this was the thing that was going to change my life. But I tried it. It didn't work. Now I'm experiencing doubt. When you have doubt in your head, it turns into anxiety in your heart. Oh man, I can't believe I spent money on this thing. Oh man, I can't believe that I risked money in the market. Now I got to go back to work and make that money back. Oh man, what if this never works for me? Right? So then the feeling that's in your heart is anxiety, and that comes out as powerlessness in your hands. The force that you could act out on things is powerlessness. So all because of the way you focused on the fact and experienced doubt in your mind and anxiety in your heart, you end up having powerlessness in your hands. What if we flip that script and we say, all right, let's look at the fact it's not working yet, but what did I learn? And how can I apply what I learned to what I do on the next trade? So now all of a sudden you're looking at the positive. And when you do that, it manifests as a belief in your mind, which is faith, right? And so now you have faith that creates a feeling in your heart of anticipation. I can't wait to try this again because I'm going to try this a different way. Anticipation ends up as power in your hands, right? So now all of a sudden you go from positivity to faith to anticipation to a force that can actually create some momentum.
It's so true. I think what you're highlighting, Dave, for all of us is the essential nature of understanding that momentum at some point has to transfer to what's happening on the inside. And we can do 100 mindset mastery sessions. And if I can come on here and I can teach powerful things, right? I can live in the anointing. But if I don't understand how that transfers to the inner man, it's actually not going to create the overflow of momentum and abundance and breakthrough that it could otherwise, because emotions just get in the way and they create these negative cycles that you just described. You know the right things. I've been quoting it lately. I can see it on my bookshelf in front of me here. How-tos were enough, we'd all be skinny, rich, and happy. It's just a tiny little potent book, right? If how-tos were enough being the driving point, right? It has to translate on the inside. And what Dave gave us there actually is a really powerful way to recognize two operating systems. And one of them is momentum against you. It's a cycle, right? Our emotions don't tell us what's true. Our emotions tell us what we think is true. We have to interrupt that if that is the cycle. I promise you, for some people on here today, all the external wisdom, tactics, principles that we can give you, if the main thing that you're struggling with is going on the inside, that's the one you want to shoot for first, because that is a place where the enemy will just be able to kind of just push a button whenever he wants. And it'll begin to create negative energy. And you want to shift that, because as Dave's describing, once I start arresting, replacing the thoughts, taking what? Captive to obedience to Christ, which is the truth, you begin to go, oh, I see this different. And now that I see it different, I'm receiving from the Lord differently in the moment, which is giving me energy and power. This is the ice is starting to tilt, right? And then you have creativity and you have confidence. The thing you would have hesitated to do, you don't. You get in the flow state. You just go for it. And then it works. And you're like, yes. And now you're getting galvanized in this. This is what we call confidence. See, think of this, everybody on here. Think of something right now you're very confident in. Like if I told Dave right now, like, Dave, I don't know. Dave, you're the worst basketball player I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? I mean, that's mean for starters, but Dave would be like, well, that's dumb because Dave knows,
You
like
haven't
Dave
seen
has
very many basketball
he
players.
has a measure of he has a measure of confidence, right? There's maybe a better example. A measure, I can
I
think
love
of
it.
some things that if Dave said to me, I'd be like, you know, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like Dave would never do that. But if he did, or some stranger did, it's going to bounce right off me. It doesn't
Mm,
matter, because the truth is so, it's so cemented in my belief system that I can't see me the way they do in that moment. They're looking at me negative. I can't see that. Now, when somebody hits on your greatest insecurity, see, you have a belief in there that's not in line with God. Doesn't mean you're perfect, but if it's creating doubt in him, if it's creating, for lack of a better term, I understand this is a little bit more intense, but hatred for yourself in some way, right? Then they say that, and ooh, man, that one hurts.
mm-hmm.
All I'm highlighting here is the massive difference between confidence and not. And when you start to use a mindset that, yes, cultivates confidence in God first, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be really powerful. And when circumstances come up that challenge that, the more confident you are in that, the more it's going to bounce right off you, right? This is the shield of faith. It's literally how the shield of faith works. We like to say, well, I just pray the shield of faith, which is fine. You know, we are spirit. We live in a spirit world. I pray that prayer too. But there's a very practical way to use the armor of God. It's
Right.
not just the ethereal whatever, right? There's actually a shield that we can wear. And what we're describing here is in part that shield. And it is very connected to momentum. It really honestly is, because
Sure is.
it will sap momentum so quickly. So you talk about trading, and there's an old saying, you know, that our trading is the sum of our last 5 trades or last 3 trades, right?
Right.
Our trading mindset. Now, as we mature, that's not true, but it
Right.
is in the beginning, right? We learn to be confident in ourselves and the Lord apart from our results. And it creates a lot of strength. I think that's a huge way that we can add or subtract from momentum. And that's why I'm taking so much time here, because I think you said that really well. I hope you guys caught that, because if you get that, you're going to be powerful. And if you don't address that, you're not going to sustain power for long. I heard somebody, David Goggins, who's just he's a Navy SEAL, potty mouth of potty mouth. So just know that. But I did hear him say once, he said, I watch men come to the end of their talent and their mind has nothing for them. And what he means is our gifts and talents just work for us. And that's great. But once they start slowing down, once they reach the limit of their development, how much have you built up in your mind confidence in God and confidence that you can follow through? Because if you're used to running on gift and talent, if you're used to running on the things that are just easier, once you start pressing into an area that isn't as natural, you're going to come to the end of your natural ability. And when that happens, what kind of power, what kind of encouragement, what kind of momentum, what kind of ecosystem is your mind going to offer you when you come to the end of your ability? Is it going to be, as Dave described, man, God is good. God is for me. I've got resources. I was on that thing with Dave and Blair. I wrote down 5 things that I can do. I'm going to go to the coach. I'm going to shoot from the baseline. This is possible. Man, it stinks. I just lost on 6 trades, but and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to adjust. I'm not going to just go out there and shoot from the 3-point, and all that stuff starts to converge. Is that what your mind offers you? Or does it go, this is impossible. Can't do this. Man, I stink at this. You know what? I told that guy I shouldn't have done this. This is just the worst decision I've ever made. You know what I mean? And I'm going to call 3 friends and I'm going to get some sympathy now. I'm going to tell them how terrible life is for me. And it's going to feel good in the moment, but it is not going to change a darn thing. You know what I mean?
Mm.
These
So
are
true.
tale
So
of two
true.
cities. It's totally different, and
Like it could be like Nehemiah, right? Nehemiah went to build the wall. He had already experienced some momentum. He got letters from the king for the governors to have safe passage. He got letters from the king for timber from the king's forest. And he built a team and he started building the wall. And I think what you're talking about, this idea of don't listen to the naysayers and don't allow yourself to just trust in yourself, because as soon as you reach the natural abilities end, you're going to just crumble, especially if you're depending on what other people say about you. Nehemiah gets there. He starts building the wall. Sanballat, he hears that the wall is being built. It says that he's wroth and filled with indignation, and he begins to mock the Jews. And if Nehemiah had listened to that, he wouldn't have finished the wall. Instead, he completely ignored the naysayers. He finished the wall. He had to have a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other, but he got it done. Flip the script on that. What's a different example? You've got Elijah, who just finished defeating the prophets of Baal, right? He called down fire from God, said God just lapped up all the water and completely obliterated all of the false prophets of Baal. He then sees the little cloud in the sky, and it's like, it's growing, and he prophesies that there will be rain. Like, he has momentum. But what happens is then he listens to Jezebel. And as soon as he listens to Jezebel, Elijah runs away and he says, I'm the only person left that serves God. He loses all his momentum, goes and hides in a cave, right? All because of what he listened to, which changed what he focused on, which changed his belief and his feelings, and he made him powerless.
Yep. No, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely tr's listing out a couple things here in the chat. Understanding how this all works and interacts with us, and that's a great example from the prophet, because obviously he's at a very high moment, and then it can shift the momentum so quickly. But then what happens? Well, then the Lord speaks and he shifts it back again. That's right?
Exactly right.
So if you have it and you lose it, you can get it back. Right?
Praise the
I don't think you have to lose it, but you can lose it and you can get it back. How many times did Joseph lose, quote, momentum? But you know what Joseph didn't lose momentum in? Faithfulness. He didn't lose momentum in seeking God first. You know what I mean? There were worldly things where God intentionally shifted the momentum because he had Joseph in a process. What didn't shift was the faithfulness of God. What didn't shift was, obviously Joseph's faithfulness wasn't perfect like God's was, but he is an example to us of faithfulness. So his faithfulness didn't really shift either through all of that. So that's really powerful.
And maybe you lose faithfulness, right? Maybe you've gone through a time where you felt like I have not been faithful to God because I let my focus shift and I lost momentum and I became weary in well-doing and I took my eyes off the prize. What's beautiful is grace covers that, right? Paul spoke about grace time and time again and gave letters to churches for that very reason, because they'd fall away and he'd try to bring them back.
I think we need to know that. I think we need to know today that we don't have to be perfect here, but that we forget what's behind and we press on, because we can win the game. Rob listed out some things here. Here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Okay. So I just said, great. Write down your own recipe. What's your step-by-step that you're going to do? And as I wrote that, I was just thinking it's probably important to say, Dave, momentum, going right back to your basketball story. Don't believe the lie that you're not doing something exponentially significant when today, Wednesday, July 5th, you do one thing different. And then tomorrow you do that, and then you do that, and then you do that, and then you do that. It's easy to think we need to go and change everything, but you don't need to go and change everything in many cases. Some cases, it's helpful to make a huge change because that can be a massive momentum shift. So I think that has its place. I really do. But I also want us to understand, if you just shift one thing. So I was going to say this earlier, but I'll tell you guys this now has a little more context. So in 2021, I moved back to Texas and I got to do some private coaching and training with Jay Cutler, who was a Mr. Olympia. He was a 4-time Mr. Olympia. Dave's heard me talk about this. This is a huge thing for me. When I first got saved, Dave, got saved out of total darkness, party lifestyle, not even party lifestyle, folks. Let's be real. It was total darkness. It was a disaster. I would have died for sure, would have died. That's my story. I get saved. One of the first things I started doing was exercising, lifting weights. It's just something I always loved doing, and the Lord has just used it for my good. Well, I get this opportunity to train with a coach, Jay Cutler. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. He tells me, here's some things you're going to do. You're not going to shoot from the top. You're going to shoot, he's making those adjustments. And here's the thing. Some of those were incredibly small. And I found them, to be totally honest, I found them kind of annoying. Like, for example, Blair, I want you to take out your phone and you're going to time every break. I don't want you to guess. I don't want you to look at the clock on the wall. I want you to time the breaks. I was like, well, how complicated is that? Think about this, folks, for a second. How complicated is that step? It's not complicated. It's not complicated. But guess what? I didn't feel like doing it. I just didn't want to do it. And it just felt really small. I'm like, really? Is that really what you're going to teach me? Like, time your breaks, Like, I figure there's like 19 other things that are like the secrets to. And one of them, that's only one. There's a few very small things. And when I teach people what I learned today, these are the things I tell them. And I started timing my breaks, Dave. And what was annoying became acceptable. What was acceptable became essential. Because what happened is I saw, holy smokes, I'm in the gym way less time. I'm maximizing time. I'm growing in personal discipline. And the breaks, I'm realizing, were way too long. So what I'm doing now is way more intense. I could have gone out and tried to add 15 more exercises and put a bunch of weight on there and read all this and watch a bunch of YouTube and do all this. No. Take your phone out and put 60 seconds on the clock. And when it dings, get back to work. And now I can't not time. When I go, I haven't trained with him for 1.5 years. When I go, I can't not time it. That was a massive shift. One little thing. And I told him, I'll say this just because I can. I sent him an email one day and I was like, man, I think we got to crank it up here. And he reached back to me. This is a 4-time world champion listening to me tell him what we should be doing. And he said, hey, knock it off, be patient, get back to work. And that was it. He told me to just be patient. So I hope, even though the story's funny, I want that to encourage somebody, because listen, Rob just said, I'm going to jump into the community, share thoughts, bounce ideas, ask questions, even the dumb ones. Maybe I'll even drop a few puns in here and there. Now that's easy to do, but if you do it one day, and 2 days, and 3 days, and 4 days, most people drop off on day 5 or 7 or 9. Now, maybe you don't need to post every day. Maybe that's not your goal, but whatever it is, it could be small. Most of the time, I don't see people doing the small things 14, 18, 45 days in. But if we would, they would do more than you think they would do.
And what does that require? It requires a change in the person, right? Like, the trader has to change. That's why we do mind mastery, is that you have to build the trader before you can build the trading. I did a cold plunge, Blair,
Exactly right.
a couple of weeks ago. Did a cold plunge. What was interesting was we were in Florida and it was like 100 degrees, but the heat index was like 115. It was just so hot. and we'd go out in the sun and you instantly felt like you were burning. And I was like, man, I got to get out of the sun. So I avoided where the sun was. I'd walk in the shade and then I'd wait for the clouds to cover the sun. And then I'd walk. I mean, it was just terrible. You're one of those people who absolutely hates the blistering heat. So like you would have melted away, Blair.
Yeah.
And so then Myron has us do this cold plunge. So we fill a bathtub full of ice, and I mean just full of ice, and put some water in it. It's probably high 30 degrees, and I go all the way in it, and I stay in it for 8 minutes.
Wow, 8 minutes is long, Dave. Yep.
8 minutes. I get out, and I'm like stiff. I gotta like move my hands and stuff, and everything's tingling. And what happened was, one, when you do a cold plunge like that, you can't focus on the pain or you will fail. You have to focus on the breathing, right? So focus on the breathing. I get through it. It changed something in me, Blair. All of a sudden I was a walking human air conditioner, and I walked outside, and all the places I sought to avoid were the places that I sought to enjoy after that. And so when it comes to trading, when it comes to changing your life in any area, you've got to recognize that something has to change in you. And the areas that you felt like were unimportant, or the areas that you altogether avoided because you didn't like them,
Right.
all of a sudden those things are the things that you will enjoy, and they will bring value to your life, but you've got to change. Something in you has to change.
And
so anyway,
I cannot agree with that more. And that's like, that to me is the trading quote of the year. Before you build the trading, you build the trader. I did not understand that. And I hope that that encourages some people out there, because I know you started trading to build the trading account. Good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. But don't be discouraged if you find yourself needing to build the trader, because it's still a worthy journey. You're still headed in the direction that you set out to get to. You're just having to do something you didn't necessarily think you were going to have to do, but you're going to be better as a result of it, you know? And I'll just throw in, I've been thinking this in my head for a little bit. I want to get this out quicker, shorter. You know, when we talk about this stuff, okay, example, you got to have a change in yourself. Well, somebody out there might say, Dave, well, wait a second. If you're telling me that I need momentum, but in order to get momentum, I need a change in me. Well, what if that's the momentum that I need? What if I need momentum? You know what I mean? Because what we're talking about here is, example, daily habits, right? Daily habits, maybe a small one. Oh, thanks, Blair, for the encouragement. It's not big things, it's small things done consistently. At least that's part of it. But how do I do that? You know, because at the end of the day, it's still if how-tos were enough, right? Well, Dave and I have mentioned a couple of them, and it's directly tied to momentum. And I think for me, this is a good spot to land. Number one, we've talked about coaches multiple times, right? We're not being sneaky here, right? It's like, that's what we're doing on this session. We're trying to impart some things that create momentum. That's what our program does. We give you an environment where you have total immersion so that you have momentum, right? I want to be a stock trader. Great. We have an environment of momentum for you that we have built for you that's very, very difficult to find, so that you can just insert yourself in it and have momentum to grow, right? So we have momentum, and you can transfer that same principle. We've talked about coaches now, right? So coaches and community, people are mentioning that in the chat. These are very powerful aspects of, okay, wait a second, but how do I create momentum? I promise you, I've been working out on my own for however long it was, you know, I mean, that was 2005, almost 15, 18 years. Okay. But I had a coach, and not just a coach. I had somebody that really had a breakthrough that I wanted and I really respected. And the accountability factor was powerful. coaches, obedience to the Lord, spiritual community, immersion into an environment, just like the seed, right? Scattered. TRADEway exists as an example to be, and again, I understand the parable is about the heart. I'm simply using that picture of seed and soil, right? TRADEway exists as soil, or cultivating the soil in your heart, right? You could even say more like a gardener. I don't mean, I'm not comparing with the Lord. I'm simply saying like a gardener, so that your heart becomes soil that can take that seed and produce 30, 60, 100. Of course, is all of our potential. So I think we need to plug in. I think we try to do things on our own. I think I go back to the story where I've got family members that are like going around in circles, and I'm like, well, hey, why not bring some power in here to get you past these roadblocks, to get you into some momentum? But whatever reason, we like to resist that. There's different reasons. There's reasons why people don't post on the community pages, Dave. And I know because they tell me, right? I had to press past myself to ask this question. Right? That's huge. That's huge. So we've got to give ourselves those things, so we're not trying to do them alone, because momentum, like I'm telling you, momentum doesn't, you cultivate things yourself. We've talked about that, I think, at length today, but exponential momentum happens in community. Maybe stop trying to control yourself, stop trying to behavior modify yourself, and change the environment of your thoughts in an environment that has the thoughts you want to have.
Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? Think on these things, guys. Whatsoever is good and pure and holy and just and a good report, think on those things. There are no self-made millionaires. There are team-made millionaires. There's no such thing as a self-made millionaire. The millionaires are the ones who are the best at getting help. So if you're wanting momentum in your finances, get some help. If you're wanting momentum in any other area of life, we can direct you to those areas as well, because we are connected to the one who cares about all areas, right? And we're going to share God's word in all of our classes. We're going to share it in all of our webinars. And I suspect that if you'll begin to build the trader, the trading will follow. So Blair, thanks for being on with us today. That's a little bit about momentum. Hope you guys enjoyed Mind Mastery. We went a little over time, but you and I tend to do that sometimes, Blair.
And by sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, Dave means every time.
We just want to keep giving you good stuff, guys. So, hey, if you want some momentum, go check out the Jumpstart Trading Challenge. The Jumpstart Challenge is coming up soon. If you'll just go email us at events@tradeway.com, events@tradeway.com, you can join that challenge, and it may give you that oomph you need in order to start having some force behind your momentum. Thanks for being on with us. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time for Mind Mastery, and then we'll see you in the market. Y'all take care.